She thought a new school meant a new beginning, but what happened inside those walls changed everything. Watch till the end. You won't believe how far she had to go. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Lily sat quietly in the back seat of her father's car, clutching her backpack tightly as they pulled up in front of Elite Academy. The towering gates and pristine front lawn were intimidating, even more so than she had imagined. This was supposed to be a fresh start, a new chapter filled with possibilities, yet all she could feel was a mix of awe and dread bubbling inside her. Her father turned to her with a proud smile, his eyes filled with hope and pride. "You've got this, sweetheart," he said, squeezing her hand. "I'm so proud of you." Lily forced a smile and nodded, trying to hide the knot tightening in her stomach. He had worked so hard for this. Years of saving, of doing without, just so she could have this chance. She couldn't let him down. As she stepped through the grand entrance, the polished floors and spotless walls made her feel like she had entered a different world. Students walked confidently through the halls in crisp uniforms, chatting in small groups. None of them looked her way. She kept her head down, gripping her schedule as she navigated her way to her first class. When she found the room, she paused at the door, took a deep breath, and walked in. The classroom was spacious and bright, with tall windows letting in streams of morning sunlight. Desks were arranged neatly in rows, and students sat quietly, some scrolling through their tablets, others whispering among themselves. As she made her way to an empty seat near the back, she felt eyes on her. Quick glances, quiet appraisals. She told herself it was normal. She was new, and curiosity was expected. But something about those stares felt heavier, sharper, as if they weren't just noticing her but judging her. The bell rang, and silence settled over the room. A tall woman with sharp features and heels that clicked authoritatively against the floor strode in. Her presence commanded attention instantly. "Good morning, class," she said. "I'm Miss Harris, your biology teacher. Let's begin." Her voice was crisp, her tone leaving no room for warmth. She paused, glancing at her notes. "We have a new student joining us today." She looked up, her eyes landing on Lily. Lily Johnson. All eyes turned to her. Lily felt her cheeks burn as she gave a small nod. "Let's all welcome Lily to the academy," Miss Harris said, though her voice carried no enthusiasm. The greetings were sparse and mumbled, and the stares didn't go away. Some students looked back at their tablets. Others continued watching her, their expressions unreadable. Lily sank slightly in her seat, trying to disappear into the background. Miss Harris began the lesson, speaking about cell structures and mitochondria, but Lily found it hard to focus. Her eyes remained fixed on her notebook, taking down everything she could, but she could still feel it, that sensation of being watched, judged. Every time Miss Harris asked a question, Lily's heart pounded, praying it wouldn't be directed at her. But of course, it was. "Miss Johnson," Miss Harris called, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Can you explain the function of the Golgi apparatus?" Lily scrambled through her notes, caught off guard. It processes proteins?" she offered hesitantly, her voice barely audible. A few students snickered. Miss Harris raised a brow. "At this academy, we speak with confidence. You'll need to do better than that." The words cut through her, sharp and cold. Lily looked down, cheeks burning, her fingers tightening around her pen. The rest of the lesson dragged on in a blur. Miss Harris continued to lecture, occasionally glancing at Lily with that same critical expression. Lily tried to keep her focus, but the sense of being out of place only grew. By the time the bell rang, she felt drained. She stood up quickly, collecting her things, eager to escape the stares and the tension. As she reached her locker, her focus was on opening it quickly and quietly. She didn't notice the group of girls approaching until she felt a sudden bump from behind, hard enough to make her stumble. "Oops," a voice said mockingly. Lily turned to see a tall girl with a smug expression surrounded by two others who barely concealed their laughter. The leader gave Lily a smirk and walked past. Lily opened her mouth, wanting to say something, to stand her ground, but the words caught in her throat. She said nothing, just bent down and picked up her fallen notebooks, swallowing the tightness in her chest. The hallways slowly emptied as students left for after-school activities. Lily waited until it was almost deserted before slipping outside. The fresh air was a small relief, but her thoughts raced with every moment of the day, every glance, every whisper, every sting of humiliation. By the time she reached home, her face was neutral, mask-like. Her father greeted her at the door, his face lighting up with excitement. "So?" he asked eagerly. "How was your first day?" Lily hesitated for a moment. She thought of telling him the truth, of how much she wanted to run away from that school and never look back. But instead, she smiled. "It was fine," she lied. "Just a lot to take in." He nodded, proud and hopeful. He began talking about the amazing future ahead of her, how proud he was, how this school would open so many doors. Lily nodded along, feeling the weight of his words like bricks on her chest. That night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling in the dark, she replayed every moment, the stares, the coldness, the humiliation. She wondered if she had made a mistake, if she really belonged there. But she couldn't let him down, not after everything he had done. So she told herself she would try harder, be stronger. Maybe tomorrow would be better. But deep down, something told her the worst was yet to come. Each morning, Lily walked through the tall iron gates of Elite Academy with her shoulders drawn tight and her gaze fixed on the ground. The grandeur that had once seemed impressive now felt cold and imposing. The halls echoed with laughter and chatter, but none of it was directed at her. She became a silent figure, drifting between classrooms, her presence acknowledged only by sideways glances and whispered comments just loud enough for her to hear. The stares that followed her were no longer just curious. They were piercing, heavy with judgment, and sometimes even amusement. Though she tried to ignore them, the constant pressure began to gnaw at her. In class, she kept her head down and her voice low, but no matter how hard she tried to stay invisible, Miss Harris made sure she never was. The biology teacher had developed a disturbing habit of calling on Lily for the most complex questions, often when she wasn't prepared or when the topic had just shifted. It felt deliberate, calculated, and every time Lily stumbled, every time her answer wasn't perfect, Miss Harris would respond with a cold remark that made the rest of the class shift uncomfortably or smirk in silent amusement. "This is basic material," she would say, her tone sharp. "I expect more effort, Miss Johnson." It didn't matter how much Lily studied the night before, how many notes she took. Miss Harris always found a way to make her feel unworthy. Lily began to dread biology more than any other class. The moments before the bell rang were filled with anxiety. Her hands would shake slightly, and she often had to force herself to breathe normally. The classroom became a place of quiet torment. Outside of class, things weren't much better. The small humiliations came in the form of accidental bumps in the hallway, sneered words, and mocking laughter behind her back. Sarah, the tall girl with the smug expression, had taken a particular interest in tormenting her. She and her group of friends crossed paths with Lily almost daily. Sometimes they would whisper and laugh just as she passed. Other times they would directly interfere with her path, walking slowly in front of her or cutting her off at her locker. One day, after lunch, Lily was returning to her locker when she felt a harsh shove from behind. Her books scattered across the floor. As she bent down to collect them, Sarah's voice floated over her shoulder. "Watch it, Johnson," she said sweetly. Her friends laughed and walked away, the sound echoing through the hallway. Lily clenched her jaw, trying to hold back the frustration and tears that threatened to break free. She wanted to yell, to push back, to do something, anything. But she was alone, surrounded by people who either didn't care or were too afraid to stand with her. Each day she grew quieter. At lunch, she sat alone. In class, she avoided eye contact. At home, she smiled and said everything was fine. Her father would ask about her day with genuine curiosity, and she always gave him the same answer. "It's going well," she would say, forcing cheerfulness into her voice. And he would believe her. He would talk about how proud he was, how this school was going to change her life. And she would nod, holding the weight of a growing sadness behind her eyes. She didn't want to disappoint him, didn't want to take away the one thing he believed in so much. At night, she would lie in bed replaying the moments of cruelty. The quiet snickers when she walked into class. The way Miss Harris would look at her with veiled contempt. The notes passed between desks, sometimes followed by poorly disguised giggles. Every moment stuck in her mind like tiny needles, slowly breaking her spirit. She had once dreamed of fitting in, of excelling in this school and making her father proud. Now she simply hoped to survive each day without breaking down. But the school wasn't finished with her. One afternoon in biology, Miss Harris announced a practical demonstration. Students would be working with a realistic model of an animal to learn how to treat small injuries. "Today," Miss Harris said, "you will learn how to properly clean and bandage a wound." She pulled out a small model of a cat, complete with synthetic fur and a fake injury on its leg. She scanned the room, then smiled slightly. "Lily, come up and help me demonstrate." Lily's stomach dropped. Her legs felt like lead as she walked to the front of the classroom. She could feel the eyes of her classmates following her every step. Miss Harris handed her a pair of plastic gloves. "Hold the model steady," she instructed, her voice cold but calm. Lily did as she was told, trying to keep her hands from trembling. Miss Harris picked up a pair of electric clippers from the demonstration tray and held them up. "When treating an animal, you must first shave around the wound," she said. "Discipline and precision are key." Her eyes flicked toward Lily. "Do you think you can handle that?" Lily nodded silently. Miss Harris didn't hand her the clippers. Instead, she turned them on herself. The buzzing filled the room. Then, without warning, she reached forward and pressed the clippers to Lily's head, shaving a patch of her hair in front of the entire class. There was a collective gasp. A few students stifled laughs. Sarah and her friends covered their mouths, their eyes wide with delighted shock. Lily froze. The clippers buzzed in her ears, the cold metal pressing against her scalp. Her heart pounded. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. Miss Harris stepped back and switched off the clippers. "Let that be a lesson," she said. "Discipline is essential. If you want to be a part of this academy, you must learn to follow instructions." Lily's hands trembled. She reached up to touch the shaved patch, feeling the uneven strands where her hair had once been. She didn't cry. She wouldn't let them see that, but the silence in the classroom was deafening. Her classmates stared, some in shock, others barely hiding their amusement. When the bell finally rang, Lily gathered her things with shaking hands. She didn't wait for the hallway to clear. She walked out as quickly as she could, head down, avoiding every glance. The buzz of the clippers still rang in her ears. The shame sat heavy on her shoulders. She reached her locker and fumbled with the lock, her fingers refusing to work. The whispers followed her, soft, cruel reminders of what had just happened. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She grabbed her books and left. The walk home was a blur. The streets passed by without meaning. Every step felt like she was sinking deeper into a place she couldn't escape from. Her father greeted her with a smile, but she barely met his eyes. "Homework," she muttered and went straight to her room. When she closed the door behind her, the weight of the day finally broke through. She sank onto her bed, pressed her hands to her face, and let the tears fall. Hot, silent sobs that racked her chest and soaked her pillow. She cried for the humiliation, for the loneliness, for the pain she couldn't tell anyone about. And for the first time, she wondered if she could keep doing this, if she could keep pretending that everything was okay. She had thought it would get better, that if she worked hard enough, things would change. But now she wasn't sure. All she knew was that she couldn't bear much more. The days after the incident with the clippers felt like a nightmare that Lily couldn't wake from. Her unevenly trimmed hair was a constant reminder of what had happened, a scar that couldn't be hidden. Even when she tried to blend into the background, she felt like a spotlight was always on her. Students didn't laugh openly anymore, but the whispers hadn't stopped. In some ways, the silence was even worse. They didn't need to say anything. She could feel the amusement in their stares, the mocking pity. Each morning before school, she stared at herself in the bathroom mirror, adjusting her hair the best she could, using clips and headbands to cover the spot Miss Harris had shaved. But no matter what she did, it never looked right. The patch was there, and it always would be. Lily walked through the hallways with her head down, hoping to avoid attention, but it found her anyway. Some students went out of their way to bump into her. Others tossed hushed insults under their breath. Sarah remained as cruel as ever, her smile smug and satisfied every time their paths crossed. At lunch, Lily sat alone in the farthest corner of the cafeteria, pretending to study. The loneliness wrapped around her like a cold fog. She stopped raising her hand in class, stopped speaking unless absolutely necessary. Every part of her screamed to disappear. And all the while, she said nothing at home. Each evening, her father would ask how her day was, and she would smile, lie, and change the subject. But the weight of it all was getting heavier, and no amount of pretending could hide it anymore. Her appetite faded. She picked at her food during dinner, often pushing it around her plate until her father stopped asking questions. She didn't sleep well. Nightmares haunted her, memories of the buzzing clippers, the laughter, the look in Miss Harris's eyes. The more she tried to suppress it, the more it surfaced. Even her schoolwork began to slip. She couldn't concentrate. Her notes became messy, incomplete. She missed assignments, something she had never done before. The anxiety followed her everywhere. It wrapped itself around her chest and refused to let go. She began avoiding mirrors altogether. The image of herself was too much to bear. She didn't recognize the girl who looked back at her, tired, hollow, afraid. One afternoon, after a particularly cruel biology class, Lily found herself hiding in the restroom, staring blankly at the floor. She had gone in there to cry, but couldn't even bring herself to do it. The tears wouldn't come anymore. She was numb. A group of girls entered, their laughter echoing off the walls. She recognized the voices and quickly ducked into a stall, holding her breath. They were talking about the upcoming school dance, about who was going with whom. Normal things. Things Lily used to think she would get to experience. But now they sounded like echoes from a different life. When they finally left, she stepped out, looked at her reflection, and couldn't take it. Her chest ached with the weight of it all. She walked out of the restroom and straight to her locker, only to find another crumpled note shoved inside. Wrong school. Wrong girl. She crumpled the paper and shoved it deep into her pocket, her hands trembling. That was it. That was the moment she realized she couldn't do this anymore. She couldn't carry this pain alone. That evening, as she walked home, the note burned in her pocket. The words replayed in her head like a cruel chant. Wrong school, wrong girl. By the time she reached her front door, her throat was tight with unshed tears. Her father greeted her with a smile, just like always. She didn't smile back this time. She said she had homework and went straight to her room, but she didn't open her books. She sat on her bed for a long time, staring at the floor. Her thoughts were heavy, her heart bruised. And then she made a decision. She stood up, walked to the door, and opened it slowly. Her father was in the kitchen, washing dishes. He turned when he heard her footsteps, smiling. "Hey, sweetie, everything okay?" Lily's throat tightened again, but this time she didn't push the feeling away. She stepped closer, her hands shaking. "Dad," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned off the water immediately and gave her his full attention. "What is it?" She hesitated, her heart pounding. "There's something I need to tell you." He nodded, his eyes softening. "Of course. Sit down." They sat at the kitchen table, and for a moment, Lily didn't know where to start. There were so many things to say, so much pain she had buried deep. She took a shaky breath and began. She told him about Miss Harris, about the constant criticism, the cruel tone, the way she was always singled out. She told him about Sarah and the other girls, how they mocked her, shoved her, humiliated her. She told him about the notes, the whispering, the laughter, and finally, she told him about the clippers. She told him how Miss Harris had shaved part of her head in front of the entire class, and how she had stood there frozen, unable to move or speak. How everyone had laughed, how she had felt her entire sense of self-worth crumble in that moment. Her father didn't interrupt. He sat in silence, his face growing darker with every word she spoke. When she finished, she couldn't look at him. She stared at the floor, afraid of what she might see in his eyes. Disappointment, anger, guilt. But instead, when he finally spoke, his voice was low and full of pain. "I had no idea," he said slowly. "Lily, I'm so sorry." She looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. "I didn't want to disappoint you," she whispered. "You worked so hard to get me into that school. I thought if I just tried harder." He reached across the table and took her hand in his. His grip was firm, grounded. "You never disappointed me," he said, "not for a second. And you should never have had to go through this alone." She started to cry again, but this time she let it happen. She cried for everything she had endured, for every word she hadn't said, for every time she had smiled when she wanted to scream. Her father moved to her side, wrapping his arms around her. "You're not alone anymore, S. I don't care who I have to talk to or what it takes. This stops now." His words were like balm to her wounds. She leaned into him, feeling the first real sense of safety she had felt in weeks. Tomorrow wouldn't be easy. There would be meetings, conversations, consequences, but she wouldn't be facing them alone. As she lay in bed that night, her eyes still swollen from crying, she felt something new, a flicker of hope. She didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time she believed that things could change, that someone would finally listen, that she might be able to breathe again, and most importantly, that she had someone by her side who would fight for her no matter what. Lily didn't sleep much that night, but the heaviness in her chest felt different now. It wasn't just sadness or shame. It was anticipation. Her father had promised to help her, to stand up for her, and though she didn't know what would happen next, she believed him. The next morning, she sat at the kitchen table, watching her father prepare with quiet determination. He had a notebook open in front of him, filled with names, dates, and everything Lily had told him. He wasn't angry in the way he had been last night. This was something colder, more focused. She sipped her tea in silence, heart pounding with nervous energy, as she tried to imagine what it would be like to face Miss Harris again, but this time with someone beside her. When they arrived at the school, they were directed to a small meeting room near the principal's office. Lily's heart beat faster with each step. The hallway felt colder, more suffocating than usual, and her legs felt unsteady beneath her. Her father walked with calm purpose, one hand gently resting on her shoulder. She didn't speak, couldn't speak. The walls of the academy that had once loomed like silent enemies now felt like they were closing in. But when they stepped into the room and saw Principal Townsend seated at the table, alongside Miss Harris, a strange calm settled over her. Miss Harris looked exactly the same, poised, sharp, her hands folded neatly in front of her. But there was something in her eyes this time, a flicker of discomfort, maybe even annoyance. She didn't smile. Principal Townsend stood to shake Lily's father's hand. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Johnson," he said. "We understand you have some concerns regarding Lily's experience here." Her father didn't sit right away. He looked directly at the principal, his voice firm and steady. Concerns is putting it mildly. Then he began. He spoke with control, but the anger simmered just beneath the surface. He recounted every detail Lily had shared with him, the constant targeting in class, the unfair treatment, the bullying from students, and the humiliation she suffered at the hands of Miss Harris. He didn't hold back. Miss Harris remained silent for most of it, though her jaw tightened slightly as the words hit harder and deeper. Principal Townsend listened with growing discomfort, glancing occasionally at Miss Harris as if trying to read her. When Lily's father described the shaving incident, the air in the room changed. The principal's expression faltered for the first time. "She shaved my daughter's hair," he said, his voice shaking with restrained fury, "in front of an entire classroom. And you're going to tell me that's acceptable?" Miss Harris finally spoke, her tone still cold but defensive. "Mr. Johnson, I run my classroom with strict standards. What happened was part of a practical lesson. It was meant as a demonstration." "A demonstration?" he interrupted. "On a child's head?" Miss Harris didn't flinch. Lily was holding the model. She was part of the lesson. I acted within the context of a disciplinary moment. Discipline is essential in a school like ours. Principal Townsend raised his hand, clearly uncomfortable. "Please, let's keep this civil. Miss Harris, is it true that you used clippers on Lily without warning or consent?" Miss Harris paused just for a second. "I didn't think it would cause such a strong reaction," she said. I believed it was within reason given the circumstances. Lily was not harmed. Her father stood from his seat, voice rising slightly. Not harmed. She came home in tears, ashamed, humiliated, hiding what happened from me for weeks. You may not have drawn blood, Miss Harris, but don't pretend you didn't hurt her. The principal tried again to calm the room. Mr. Johnson, I assure you we take these matters seriously. If Lily felt targeted or unsafe, we will conduct a full review. But I must also remind you that Miss Harris has been with this institution for years. She is one of our most respected teachers. Her father leaned forward, voice low and steady now. Respected doesn't mean untouchable. If you ignore this, you are failing every student who walks into her classroom. And if this continues, I will pursue every available channel, legal and public. Principal Townsend nodded slowly. We understand. I'll make sure a proper investigation is opened immediately. Miss Harris said nothing more. She sat back in her chair, eyes narrowed but silent. The meeting ended with tense handshakes and empty assurances, but as they walked out, Lily felt something different. For the first time, someone had stood up for her. Someone had looked her tormentor in the eye and said, "Enough." The walk through the hallway felt lighter, the walls less oppressive. Her father walked beside her, hand on her back. She didn't speak, but he didn't need her to. She knew he understood. Over the next few days, the school atmosphere began to shift. It was subtle at first. Miss Harris became quieter in class, no longer singling Lily out, though her eyes still carried that familiar coldness. Some students started to whisper even more. News of the meeting had spread. But Sarah and her friends didn't back down. In fact, they seemed irritated that Lily hadn't disappeared. One afternoon, as she was gathering her books, Sarah brushed past her, muttering under her breath, "Daddy's little princess can't take a little teasing, huh?" Lily didn't respond. She held her breath, kept her head down, and waited for the laughter to fade. That night, her father returned from work with a strange look in his eyes. "I spoke with some other parents today," he said. Lily looked up from the table. "Parents of other kids in your school? A few of them had stories that sounded a lot like yours." Lily's eyes widened. "You mean Miss Harris treated them the same way?" He nodded. "They said their kids complained of being singled out, humiliated, talked down to. One of them even pulled their child out of the school last year." Her heart beat faster. "What are you going to do?" "We're going to speak to them again. I already reached out to a lawyer. If the school doesn't act, we will." For the first time in weeks, Lily felt something rise inside her that wasn't fear. It was small, but it was strong. It was hope. The following week, a meeting was held at the school. Several parents showed up. The lawyer, calm and confident, laid out each incident, including Lily's, backed by statements and timelines. Principal Townsend listened, his face pale. Miss Harris was not present. By the end of the meeting, the school agreed to suspend her pending an investigation. They also announced a formal review of school policies on bullying and teacher conduct. Lily stood quietly beside her father as they left the meeting. He looked down at her and smiled. "We did it," he said. "You did it." She didn't know what the future would bring. She didn't know if Sarah and the others would stop, or if another teacher would be any better. But for now, there was a crack in the wall, and through it, light was starting to shine. The change didn't happen overnight, but Lily could feel it with every step she took through the hallways of Elite Academy. After the suspension of Miss Harris and the implementation of new policies, the atmosphere shifted. The cold stares and sharp whispers that had once followed her like shadows were no longer constant. Some students still looked at her with curiosity, others with guilt. But for the first time since she had arrived, she no longer felt entirely alone. Teachers were more watchful, more cautious. Rules around behavior and respect were being enforced with a new seriousness. Announcements played over the intercom about anti-bullying initiatives and safe spaces. Posters went up around the school promoting inclusion, kindness, and awareness. It all felt surreal, like the school had suddenly remembered what it meant to protect its students. Lily didn't let her guard down completely. She still avoided Sarah in the hallways, still kept her head down when the laughter echoed nearby. But the weight on her chest wasn't as crushing anymore. Sarah and her friends had lost their smug confidence. Their comments had grown quieter, less frequent. Sarah still glared when their paths crossed, but she never spoke. There were no more shoves, no more cruel notes. Their power had been fractured, and they knew it. Lily took small steps toward reclaiming herself. She started answering questions in class again, cautiously at first. Her new biology teacher, Mrs. Grace, treated her with respect and patience. The woman smiled often and encouraged students without condescension. Lily found herself paying attention in biology without fear. She even raised her hand once, and when she gave an answer, Mrs. Grace nodded with a warm, "Well done," instead of a cutting remark. One afternoon, as Lily was packing up her books, a quiet voice called her name. She turned to see Emma, a girl from her class who had always stayed on the sidelines. Emma looked nervous, clutching her books tightly to her chest. "Hey," she said, offering a small smile. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for not saying anything before. I saw what was happening, and I didn't do anything. I should have." Lily blinked, surprised by the apology. She wasn't sure what to say at first. No one had ever apologized to her. She managed a small smile. "Thanks," she said softly. "That means a lot." Emma looked relieved and added, "I think you're really brave." Lily didn't feel brave, but hearing it out loud made her stand a little taller. From that day forward, Emma started sitting with her at lunch. At first, it was just the two of them, but gradually, a few others joined. Students who had once watched silently now made tentative efforts to include her. They asked about homework, offered to work on group projects, and sometimes even invited her into conversations. It was awkward at times, but it was real. Lily wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't the target of cruel games or sarcastic comments. Slowly, she was becoming part of the school, not just someone passing through it. The school's administration continued pushing its anti-bullying message. Workshops were held during homeroom. Students were encouraged to speak openly about respect and inclusion. Lily listened quietly during those sessions, not ready to share her story publicly, but deeply aware of how important these changes were. One day, she saw a flyer on the bulletin board about a new student-led initiative focused on anti-bullying and mental health. Without thinking too much, she wrote her name on the sign-up sheet. She didn't know what she would say or how she would contribute, but something inside her told her it was time. At the first meeting, she sat in the back, nervous, unsure. But when others began to share their stories about feeling left out, mocked, misunderstood, she realized she wasn't alone. When it was her turn to speak, her voice trembled at first, but she found strength in the eyes of the students listening. She told them about the isolation, the humiliation, the haircut, and the day she finally told her father. She told them how speaking up had changed everything. There were tears in the room, nods of understanding, even admiration. Emma reached over and squeezed her hand. Lily began helping organize events with the group. She helped plan an awareness week, worked with teachers on presentations, and even spoke at an assembly. Her confidence grew with every step. She no longer walked the hallways shrinking into herself. Her shoulders were back, her chin was lifted. Students greeted her now, some thanked her. The very school that had once crushed her spirit was slowly becoming a place where she felt safe. One afternoon, Principal Townsend asked to see her. She sat across from him in his office, hands folded. "Lily," he began, "I want you to know how proud we are of you. Your bravery has made a real difference here." She nodded, surprised and humbled. "Thank you," she said. "It's been hard, but I'm glad I spoke up." He smiled. "You've changed this place, Lily, for the better." At home, her father noticed the difference. She laughed more. She slept better. One evening, they sat together on the porch as the sun dipped below the trees. He looked at her, his eyes soft. "You know," he said, "you taught me something too. You reminded me what strength really looks like." Lily leaned her head against his shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without you." They sat in silence, the quiet between them full of understanding. She had faced the darkest parts of herself, of her world, and come out stronger. Her voice had once been buried beneath fear, but now it rang clear. The memory of what she endured would never fully disappear, but it no longer defined her. She had become more than the girl who was bullied. She had become someone who used her pain to create change. Elite Academy still had work to do, but it was on the right path, and Lily had helped carve that path. As spring arrived, she walked through the school doors each morning, not with dread, but with quiet pride. She belonged. She mattered. She was no longer afraid. Her story had begun with silence and suffering, but it ended with purpose and power. And as long as her voice could be heard, no one else would have to suffer in silence again. Her voice changed everything, not just for herself, but for many others. If this story moved you, leave a comment, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. Tell us where you're watching from.